What happens when a man trained to kill silently finds himself trapped at 35,000 feet with nowhere to run? One of the most classified military operation in decades depends on a single passenger who never expected to become the last line of defense between American soil and catastrophe. This is the story of Marcus "Ghost" Rodriguez, a Navy SEAL who thought he was taking a routine commercial flight home to see his dying father. He had no idea that his window seat would become a front-row view to an international crisis that would test everything he learned in the darkest corners of warfare. Sometimes the most dangerous missions begin where you least expect them. Sometimes a hero is just a tired soldier who refuses to let innocent people die on his watch. And sometimes the difference between peace and war comes down to one man's ability to stay silent when everyone else is screaming. The code words Black Anvil weren't supposed to be heard by civilian ears. But when they crackled through the aircraft's communication system, Marcus knew his quiet flight home had just become the most important mission of his life. Marcus Rodriguez pulled his baseball cap lower over his eyes as he settled into Seat 14A aboard United Flight 847 from San Diego to Dallas. The Boeing 777 was only half full, which suited him perfectly. After 18 months of classified operations in places that didn't officially exist, the last thing he wanted was small talk with a chatty passenger. The Navy SEAL had earned his nickname Ghost the hard way, moving through hostile territory without leaving a trace. But today he just wanted to be invisible for different reasons. His father was dying, and Marcus was racing against time to reach the hospital before it was too late. He'd been pulled from a training exercise in Coronado when the call came. Lung cancer, the doctors said. Stage 4. Maybe days, maybe hours. His commanding officer had taken one look at Marcus's face and signed the emergency leave papers without question. You need to go, Commander Hayes had said simply. Family first. Marcus stared out the window as the aircraft pushed back from a gate. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly beyond the airport, its surface catching the late afternoon sun like scattered diamonds. Somewhere out there, his SEAL team was probably running another night exercise, practicing the kind of precision operations that had made their unit legendary. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent years learning to appear and disappear like smoke, to strike without warning and vanish without a trace. But he couldn't make time stand still long enough to say goodbye to the man who'd taught him what honor meant. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Carmen. Dad's asking for you. Hurry. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to push away the memories flooding back. His father teaching him to throw a baseball in their backyard in El Paso. The old man's calloused hands showing him how to tie knots that would hold under pressure. The pride in his eyes when Marcus graduated from BUD/S training and earned his trident. You're not just representing yourself out there, Mijo, his father had said that day. You carry all of us with you. The flight attendant's voice over the intercom pulled him back to the present. Standard safety announcements, nothing unusual. Marcus had flown enough missions to know aircraft inside and out. He could probably navigate this Boeing with his eyes closed, find every exit, every potential weapon, every weak point in the cabin structure. Old habits died hard. As the plane climbed toward cruising altitude, Marcus noticed a passenger across the aisle. A woman in her 50s, obviously nervous, gripping her armrests as turbulence rocked the aircraft. First-time flyer, he guessed. Her fear was written across her face in the way she flinched at every sound. 2 rows behind him, a businessman was already buried in his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard, probably trying to close some deal before landing. Marcus had seen the type countless times during commercial flights. The world could be ending, and they'd still be checking their email. Near the front of the cabin, a young couple whispered excitedly to each other. Honeymooners, based on the way they couldn't keep their hands apart and the matching wedding rings that caught the cabin light. They kept taking selfies with the airplane window in the background. Marcus envied their innocence. They saw a routine flight as an adventure, something to document and share. They had no idea how fragile the systems were that kept them safe, how many potential failure points existed between takeoff and landing. How quickly normal could become catastrophic. The SEAL in him automatically cataloged details. Emergency exits at rows 6, 16, and 32. Life vests under every seat. Oxygen masks that would drop if cabin pressure failed. Flight crew appeared competent and alert. Captain had announced 23 years of flying experience during his pre-flight welcome. Everything seemed normal. Routine. Boring even. Marcus pulled out a paperback novel he'd grabbed from the airport bookstore. Some thriller about terrorists hijacking a passenger jet. He almost laughed at the cliché. Real operations were never as dramatic as fiction made them seem. They were usually methodical, precise, and over before anyone realized what was happening. The aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 37,000 feet, and the captain turned off the seatbelt sign. Passengers began moving around the cabin, some heading to restrooms, others stretching their legs in the aisles. Marcus kept reading, but part of his mind remained alert. It was impossible to completely turn off the training. His peripheral vision tracked movement throughout the cabin. His ears filtered ambient noise for anything unusual. His body stayed relaxed but ready to react. The nervous woman across the aisle had finally stopped gripping her armrests. The businessman was still typing furiously on his laptop. The honeymooners had fallen asleep against each other, her head on his shoulder. Everything normal. Everything routine. The flight attendants began preparing the beverage service, rolling their cart down the aisle with practiced efficiency. Marcus asked for black coffee when they reached his row. The attendant, a woman named Janet according to her name tag, smiled professionally as she handed him the small cup. Flying home? She asked, making conversation. Family business, Marcus replied simply. She nodded and moved on. He appreciated that she didn't push for details. Some people had a gift for reading when someone needed to be left alone. Marcus sipped his coffee and watched the landscape far below. They were flying over Arizona now, the desert stretching endlessly in all directions. Somewhere down there, other military units were training in conditions that would break ordinary people, learning to survive in environments that didn't care about human comfort or convenience. He thought about his teammates, probably running night drills about now. Rick Hammer Johnson, the team's demolitions expert who could blow a door without scratching the paint on the wall next to it. Tony Snake Vasquez, their communications specialist who could hack into enemy networks while hanging upside down from a helicopter. Sarah Phoenix Chun, their medic who'd saved more lives than she'd taken, though she was deadly accurate with any weapon you put in her hands. They were more than a team. They were family. The kind of family that would die for each other without question because they knew the others would do the same. But his blood family was different. His father had given him something the military never could. A sense of where he came from. Roots that went deeper than any mission or medal. The aircraft hit another patch of turbulence. Nothing serious. The nervous woman across the aisle tensed up again, knuckles white on her armrests. Marcus considered offering some reassurance, but she seemed to be managing. His phone, set to airplane mode, showed a picture of his family from last Christmas. His father looking frielier than usual, but still smiling, flanked by Marcus and Carmen. The old man had insisted on cooking dinner himself, despite his obvious exhaustion. A man provides for his family, he'd said when they tried to help. It's what we do. That was his father. Stubborn, proud, and absolutely uncompromising when it came to taking care of the people he loved. Marcus had inherited that trait, though it had been refined by years of military service into something sharper and more dangerous. The beverage service continued down the aisle. Other passengers chatted quietly or dozed in their seats. The honeymooners had woken up and were sharing a bag of pretzels, feeding each other with the kind of playful intimacy that made Marcus both happy for them and acutely aware of his own solitude. He'd had relationships over the years, but nothing that survived the demands of his career. Hard to maintain a romantic connection when you disappeared for months at a time to places you couldn't talk about, doing things that would give most people nightmares. Maybe after his father passed, Marcus would think seriously about what came next. He had enough time in service to retire with full benefits. Maybe he'd find something that used his skills, but didn't require quite as much secrecy. Private security, perhaps, or training law enforcement in tactical operations. But those were thoughts for later. Right now, all that mattered was getting home in time. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, we're making good time today. Current weather in Dallas is clear skies, temperature 72 degrees. We should be arriving about 15 minutes ahead of schedule. Good news. Every minute counted now. Marcus finished his coffee and tried to return his book, but concentration was becoming harder. His mind kept drifting to memories of his father, teaching him to drive in an empty parking lot, patient even when Marcus stripped the gears learning to work the clutch, taking him camping in the mountains outside El Paso, showing him how to read the signs in nature that most people missed. The world talks to you all the time, Mijo, his father had explained as they sat around a campfire under stars that seemed close enough to touch. You just have to know how to listen. That lesson had served Marcus well in the military. The ability to read his environment, to notice things that didn't belong, had kept him alive in situations where other operators didn't make it home. The aircraft continued its steady progress eastward. Below them, the landscape gradually changed from desert to prairie. Soon they'd be over Texas, and not long after that, they'd begin their descent into Dallas. Marcus checked his watch. Another hour and a half, maybe less if they maintained their current speed. Then, a quick connection to his final destination, and he'd be at his father's bedside before midnight. He closed his eyes and tried to rest, but sleep wouldn't come. Too much adrenaline, too much anticipation. Instead, he found himself listening to the ambient sounds of the aircraft. The steady hum of engines, the whisper of air over the fuselage, quiet conversations between passengers, the occasional ping from a galley. All normal sounds. All exactly what you'd expect to hear on a routine commercial flight. Marcus had no way of knowing that 3,000 miles away, a situation was developing that would transform his quiet journey home into something very different. He had no idea that encrypted communications were flying between military installations, or that F-35 fighters were being scrambled from 3 different air bases. He certainly couldn't have imagined that in less than an hour, the words Black Anvil would crackle through the aircraft's communication system, changing everything. For now, Marcus Rodriguez was just a tired son racing to say goodbye to his dying father. The war would find him soon enough. The first sign that something was wrong came when Marcus noticed the flight attendant's behavior change. It was subtle at first. Janet, who had served him coffee earlier, kept glancing toward the cockpit with an expression Marcus recognized from his military experience. Controlled concern. Professional anxiety. She was trying to maintain her normal routine while processing information that didn't fit the usual patterns. Marcus closed his book and began paying closer attention to his surroundings. The businessman 2 rows behind had stopped typing and was looking out his window with a puzzled expression. The nervous woman across the aisle was gripping her armrests again, but this time it wasn't because of turbulence. Then Marcus saw what they were seeing. Through the small aircraft windows, he could make out 2 dark shapes keeping pace with their Boeing 777. At first glance, they might have been other commercial aircraft, but Marcus's trained eye caught details that made his blood run cold. The swept-wing profile was unmistakable. F-35 Lightning II fighter jets, flying in a precise formation that suggested they weren't there by coincidence. Military aircraft didn't escort civilian flights unless something was very, very wrong. Marcus's mind immediately shifted into operational mode. Years of training kicked in automatically, his body chemistry changing as his system flooded with controlled adrenaline. Every sense became sharper. Every detail in his environment gained significance. The honeymooners had noticed the escorts now too. The young man was pointing out the window to his wife, who was taking pictures with her phone. They thought it was exciting, probably assuming it was some kind of ceremony or demonstration. Marcus knew better. He watched Janet make her way to the cockpit, her professional smile not quite hiding the tension in her shoulders. She knocked on the reinforced door and was quickly admitted. Through the brief opening, Marcus glimpsed the flight crew in intense discussion, their voices too low to carry over the engine noise. The aircraft's PA system crackled to life. Captain Morrison's voice was steady, but carried an undertone that made Marcus's training alarms go off. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a minor technical issue with our navigation equipment. As a precautionary measure, we'll be accompanied by some military aircraft until we can resolve the situation. There's no immediate danger, and we expect to continue to our destination as planned. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened." Technical issue. Navigation equipment. Marcus had heard enough military briefings to recognize carefully chosen words when he heard them. The captain was telling the truth, but not the whole truth. The kind of partial disclosure designed to prevent panic while preparing people for potential changes to their situation. The businessman behind him was now openly staring out the window. "Are those fighter jets?" he asked his seatmate loudly enough for half the cabin to hear. Several passengers turned to look out windows. Marcus could see the concern spreading through the cabin like ripples from a thrown stone. People were starting to ask questions, their voices carrying the first hints of anxiety. Marcus made a decision. He quietly unbuckled his seatbelt and stood, moving to the lavatory at the rear of the cabin. Not because he needed to use the facilities, but because it would give him a better view of the aircraft and let him assess the situation without alarming other passengers. As he walked down the aisle, he could hear fragments of conversation. The nervous woman was asking a flight attendant if everything was okay. The honeymooners were debating whether to call their families. An elderly man was telling his wife about a documentary he'd seen about airplane emergencies. Marcus locked the lavatory door behind him and looked out the small window. From this angle, he could see at least 3 F-35s maintaining formation with their aircraft. Professional spacing, alert posture, weapons visible on their hardpoints. This wasn't a training exercise or ceremonial escort. This was a combat air patrol responding to a perceived threat. But what kind of threat required fighter escorts for a domestic commercial flight? Marcus ran through possibilities as he returned to his seat. Hijacking threat seemed unlikely given the escorts. If terrorists had taken control of the aircraft, the military response would be different. Bomb threat was possible, but again, the escort pattern didn't match that scenario. The most logical explanation was that their aircraft had been identified as potentially compromised in some way. Maybe communications had been hacked. Maybe someone on board was a person of interest. Maybe they were carrying cargo that had raised flags in some intelligence database. Marcus settled back into his seat and activated his phone's camera, using the reflection in the window to study other passengers without being obvious about it. Everyone appeared to be exactly what they seemed. Nervous travelers dealing with an unusual situation, but no one displaying the kind of behavior that would suggest hostile intent. The flight attendants were moving through the cabin now, checking that seat belts were fastened and trying to reassure concerned passengers. Marcus could see they were following a protocol, but their body language suggested they didn't have complete information about what was happening either. The aircraft communications system crackled again, but this time it wasn't the captain's voice. Instead, Marcus heard something that made every muscle in his body tense. It was a brief transmission, lasting only a few seconds, but the words were clear enough for anyone paying attention to understand. Black Anvil, this is Raptor lead. Package is secure. Repeat, package is secure. Marcus felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Black Anvil was a classified military operation code he'd heard only twice in his career. Both times, it had been associated with the highest levels of national security. The kind of operation that could start or prevent wars. The kind of mission where failure wasn't an option because the consequences were unthinkable. The fact that he was hearing it on a commercial flight meant something had gone catastrophically wrong with whatever Black Anvil was supposed to accomplish. Marcus looked around the cabin with new eyes. Every passenger was now a potential factor in a situation that apparently had national security implications. The nervous woman, the businessman, the honeymooners, even the elderly couple arguing about documentaries. One of them, or something they were carrying, was connected to whatever Black Anvil was designed to address. The aircraft banked slightly to the left, enough for Marcus to notice, but subtle enough that most passengers probably attributed it to normal flight procedures. Through the window, he could see they were changing course, no longer heading directly toward Dallas. Captain Morrison's voice returned to the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, air traffic control has requested that we adjust our route slightly due to weather conditions ahead. We may experience a brief delay, but we'll keep you updated as the situation develops." Weather conditions. In clear skies with unlimited visibility. Marcus almost admired the captain's ability to maintain the cover story while probably dealing with instructions from multiple military commands. The fighter escort had increased to at least 4 aircraft now. Marcus could see them rotating positions, maintaining constant coverage of the Boeing 777 from all angles. Professional, precise, and absolutely unambiguous in their message. This aircraft was under military protection, which meant it was either carrying something extremely valuable or extremely dangerous. Marcus's phone vibrated with another text from his sister. "Where are you? Dad's asking for you every few minutes." The words hit him like a physical blow. While he was stuck in the middle of what was obviously a major military operation, his father was dying. Time was running out on both fronts, and there was nothing he could do about either situation. The businessman behind him was on his phone now, despite the captain's earlier request for passengers to remain seated. Marcus could hear him trying to explain to someone that his flight was being escorted by fighter jets. His voice was getting louder and more agitated as whoever he was talking to apparently didn't believe him. Other passengers were starting to get restless too. The carefully maintained calm was beginning to fray as people realized this was more than a minor technical issue. The flight attendants were working harder to manage questions and concerns, their professional facades showing stress cracks. Marcus forced himself to remain still and observe whatever was happening. His military training told him that panicking passengers would only make the situation more dangerous. If Black Anvil was in play, there were people in command centers making decisions that could affect thousands of lives. Adding chaos to their calculations wouldn't help anyone. But he couldn't completely suppress his operational instincts. His eyes tracked the movements of every person in his field of vision. His ears filtered conversations for anything that might provide additional intelligence. His mind categorized potential threats and assets. The nervous woman across the aisle was crying now, quietly but visibly. The honeymooners had stopped taking pictures and were holding hands tightly. The elderly couple had gone silent, both staring out their window at the military escort. Marcus realized he was facing a fundamental decision. He could continue pretending to be an ordinary passenger, hoping whatever was happening would resolve itself without his involvement. Or he could accept that his unique skills and security clearance might be needed if the situation deteriorated further. The problem was that revealing his military background could dramatically complicate whatever operation was underway. Black Anvil protocols were classified far above his clearance level. His presence on the aircraft could be seen as either a fortunate coincidence or a massive security breach, depending on what intelligence agencies were running the show. Another coded transmission crackled through the communication system. This time Marcus caught references to package integrity and extraction protocols. Military jargon that told him the situation was escalating according to predetermined plans. The aircraft banked again, more sharply this time. They were definitely not heading toward Dallas anymore. Marcus estimated they were now on a southeastern heading, possibly toward military installations in Louisiana or Mississippi, somewhere with the infrastructure to handle a situation requiring Black Anvil protocols. Captain Morrison's voice returned, and this time his tone carried a note of finality that made Marcus's chest tighten. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need everyone to listen carefully. We've received instructions from air traffic control to land at an alternate airport for security reasons. We'll be on the ground shortly, and you'll be met by appropriate authorities who will explain the situation and arrange for your continued travel. Please remain calm and follow the instructions of the flight crew." Security reasons. The euphemisms were getting thinner. Marcus looked out at the fighter escort and realized he was about to be thrust into a situation he'd never trained for. He was a weapon designed for precision strikes in foreign territories, not domestic operations involving civilian aircraft, and classified protocols he wasn't supposed to know existed. But as another text from his sister appeared on his phone, begging him to hurry because their father might not last much longer, Marcus realized that sometimes fate doesn't care about your training or your clearance level. Sometimes it just puts you exactly where you need to be, whether you're ready or not. The Boeing 777 began its descent toward what Marcus now realized was Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana. He could see the distinctive runway layout through his window, along with the massive B-52 hangars that made the installation unmistakable. Whatever was happening with Black Anvil, they were bringing the aircraft to one of the most secure military facilities in the country. As they descended, Marcus noticed increased radio chatter bleeding through the aircraft's communication system. Fragments of conversations between air traffic control, military commanders, and what sounded like multiple federal agencies. The words containment protocol and asset security kept recurring, along with references to something called Package Zebra. The passengers around him were becoming more agitated as the reality of their situation sank in. The businessman was demanding answers from the flight attendants, who clearly didn't have any to give. The nervous woman had stopped crying, but was now staring out her window with a shell-shocked expression. Even the honeymooners had abandoned their earlier excitement and were whispering urgently to each other. Marcus felt his phone vibrate again. Another text from Carmen. This one just 3 words. Please hurry home. He closed his eyes and tried to center himself. His father was dying while he sat helpless in an aircraft that had apparently become the center of a national security crisis. The irony was bitter. He'd spent his career running toward danger, but now when his family needed him most, he was trapped in a situation he couldn't control or escape. The aircraft's landing gear deployed with a mechanical whir that seemed louder than usual in the tense cabin. Marcus could see ground vehicles positioning themselves along the runway. Military police, bomb disposal units, and what looked like hazmat teams. Whatever they thought might be on this aircraft, they were taking no chances. Captain Morrison's voice returned to the PA system, and this time his professional composure had slipped enough for Marcus to hear the strain. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing momentarily at Barksdale Air Force Base. After we're on the ground, please remain seated until instructed to move by military personnel. They'll board the aircraft and provide further instructions. I want to emphasize that this is a security precaution, not an emergency. Please stay calm and cooperate fully with any requests. The landing was smooth despite the circumstances. As soon as the wheels touched down, Marcus could see vehicles racing toward their position. The fighter escort maintained formation until the aircraft had completely stopped, then peeled away in different directions. Through his window, Marcus watched a small army of personnel in various uniforms converging on their location. Air Force security forces, FBI agents in tactical gear, and specialists whose exact affiliation wasn't immediately obvious. The level of response confirmed his worst suspicions about the seriousness of whatever Black Anvil was designed to address. The aircraft came to a complete stop about a quarter mile from the main terminal, in an area clearly designed for sensitive operations. Military vehicles formed a perimeter around them, while specialized equipment was moved into position. Marcus's trained eye cataloged the setup. Command and control vehicles, communications arrays, and what appeared to be mobile laboratory units. This wasn't just about getting passengers off an aircraft. This was about processing a potential threat that required immediate technical analysis. The main cabin door opened, and the first boarding party entered. Marcus immediately recognized the bearing and equipment of a tactical entry team, though their uniforms carried no identifying patches. Behind them came individuals in suits who were obviously federal agents, followed by people in civilian clothes who radiated the kind of quiet authority that suggested intelligence services. A woman in her 40s, wearing a simple business suit but carrying herself like someone accustomed to command situations, stepped to the front of the cabin. Her voice was calm, but carried absolute authority when she spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Agent Sarah Chun with the Department of Homeland Security. I need everyone to listen carefully and follow instructions exactly as given. We're going to deplane in an orderly fashion, starting from the rear of the aircraft. You'll be escorted to a secure area where we'll verify identities and explain the situation." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Agent Sarah Chun. The same Sarah Phoenix Chun who had served with the SEAL team before transferring to federal service 2 years ago. She would recognize him immediately, which could either be very good or very bad depending on what classified operation he'd stumbled into. As passengers began standing and gathering their belongings, Marcus made a decision. He would let Sarah discover his presence, naturally rather than trying to hide or reveal himself prematurely. His years of working with her had taught him that she was capable of making rapid decisions under pressure, and she would know how to handle his unexpected appearance better than he would. The deployment process began at the rear of the cabin, with each passenger being escorted off individually by a 2-person team. Marcus could see through the windows that they were being taken to a large hangar where additional processing stations had been set up. As the evacuation slowly moved forward, Marcus found himself studying his fellow passengers with new intensity. One of them was connected to Black ANVIL, either as a target or an asset. Someone on this aircraft was carrying information, technology, or knowledge that had triggered the highest levels of national security response. The elderly couple went quietly when their turn came. The businessman complained loudly, but was escorted off without incident. The nervous woman seemed almost relieved to be leaving the aircraft, even under these circumstances. When the honeymooners' turn came, Marcus noticed something that made his operational instincts flare. The young man's behavior had subtly changed during the landing process. Where before he had seemed genuinely confused and concerned, now there was something different in his eyes, a watchfulness that didn't match his earlier innocent tourist demeanor. Marcus's suspicions crystallized when he saw the man's hand movements as he gathered his carry-on bag. Professional, economical, with the kind of spatial awareness that came from specialized training. Either the man was military or intelligence, or he was something else entirely. The young woman with him appeared genuinely confused by his behavior change, which suggested she wasn't part of whatever role he might be playing. That made the situation even more complex, because it meant there was an innocent person physically connected to a potential threat. As they approached Marcus's row, he could see Sarah's recognition flicker across her face. She maintained her professional composure, but he caught the slight tightening around her eyes that indicated she was rapidly recalculating whatever plan she'd been operating under. "Sir," she said formally, "please gather your belongings and come with us." Marcus complied without comment, following the standard escort protocol as they guided him off the aircraft. But as they reached the boarding bridge, Sarah fell into step beside him. "Ghost," she said quietly, using his operational call sign. "We need to talk privately before processing. Whatever you're doing on this flight, it just became classified above both our clearance levels." They entered the hangar where the other passengers were being processed through what appeared to be a thorough but efficient security screening. Each person was being interviewed separately while their luggage and personal effects were examined by technical specialists. Sarah guided Marcus to a small office that had been hastily set up in a corner of the hangar. As soon as the door closed behind them, her professional mask slipped slightly. "Marcus, what the hell are you doing here? And please tell me it's a coincidence." "Emergency leave," he replied simply. "My father's dying. I was trying to get home to El Paso." Sarah's expression shifted from suspicion to sympathy, but only briefly. "I'm sorry about your father, but we have a situation that just got exponentially more complicated with your presence here." "Black ANVIL," Marcus said. "I heard it over the comm system." Sarah's face went pale. "You weren't supposed to hear that. The fact that you know that designation means this conversation just became something I need to report up the chain immediately." "Phoenix, what's happening here? What's Black ANVIL?" She hesitated, clearly weighing how much she could reveal even to someone with a security clearance. 3 days ago, someone stole a piece of technology from a classified project, something that could fundamentally alter the balance of power if it fell into the wrong hands. We tracked the thief to this flight. The honeymooners, Marcus said without hesitation. Sarah stared at him. How did you know that? The male. His behavior changed during landing. Professional movement patterns, situational awareness that doesn't match the cover identity. The woman with him appears to be genuine civilian. Jesus, Marcus, you read all that during a routine deployment. There's nothing routine about military escorts and Black Anvil protocols. Who is he? Sarah pulled out a tablet and showed him a photograph. The same young man, but in the image he was wearing a military uniform with technical specialist insignia. Lieutenant Daniel Morrison, nuclear weapons systems engineer with Q-level clearance. 3 days ago, he walked out of Sandia National Laboratories with a device that could remotely trigger nuclear detonation sequences. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. He's carrying a nuclear trigger device. Not just carrying it. According to our technical analysis, he's modified it to interface with civilian aircraft navigation systems. We think he planned to test it by taking control of commercial flights, demonstrating its capabilities to potential buyers. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. If he can hijack aircraft remotely, he can turn any commercial flight into a guided missile. No hijackers needed, no weapons to detect, no way to stop it once he activates the system. That's why Black Anvil was activated. This isn't just about recovering stolen technology. If Morrison successfully demonstrates his modified device, every commercial aircraft in the world becomes a potential weapon. The entire aviation industry would have to be grounded until we could develop countermeasures. Marcus understood now why the response had been so overwhelming. This wasn't just a theft case or even a terrorism investigation. This was about preventing the collapse of global air transportation and the thousands of deaths that could result from weaponized commercial aircraft. Where's the device now? That's the problem. We've searched his luggage, his wife's luggage, even their clothing. Nothing. Either he hid it somewhere on the aircraft, or he found a way to smuggle it through airport security that we haven't identified yet. A knock on the office door interrupted their conversation. Another agent entered and whispered something to Sarah that made her expression darken further. Marcus, we have another problem. Morrison's wife isn't his wife. The woman with him is Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a cybersecurity specialist from MIT. She disappeared from her hotel room in Boston 2 days ago, the same day Morrison went missing. Kidnapping. We don't know yet. But if she's a hostage, it means Morrison has leverage beyond just the stolen technology. And if she's a willing participant, it means he has technical expertise that makes the device even more dangerous. Marcus felt his phone vibrate again. Another text from Carmen. This one more urgent. Dad's asking for you. Doctor says maybe hours. He showed the message to Sarah, who read it with a conflicted expression. I'm sorry, Marcus. I know what your father means to you. But right now, you're the only person on this base with both the security clearance and the operational experience to help us resolve this situation safely. What do you need me to do? Sarah looked at him for a long moment before answering. We need you to help us find that device before Morrison figures out we're onto him. And we need to do it without letting him know that we know about Dr. Walsh's real identity. Marcus closed his eyes and thought about his father, dying alone while asking for his son. Then he thought about Morrison's stolen device and its potential to turn every commercial aircraft into a weapon. When he opened his eyes, Sarah could see his decision written clearly across his face. Tell me what you need. Sarah led Marcus to a secure briefing room where a joint task force had assembled in record time. Representatives from multiple agencies surrounded a table covered with technical diagrams, surveillance photos, and classified documents. The urgency in the room was palpable. Colonel James Mitchell, the base commander, looked up as they entered. His expression showed the strain of managing a crisis that could have global implications. Agent Shun, I assume this is the SEAL operator you mentioned? Yes, sir. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rodriguez, currently on emergency leave, but with relevant experience in technical threat assessment. Marcus stepped forward. Sir, I understand the situation involves stolen nuclear weapons technology. How can I assist? Colonel Mitchell gestured to the technical displays around the room. What Agent Shin may not have fully explained is that Lieutenant Morrison's device isn't just a remote trigger. According to our weapons specialists, he's created something entirely new. A system that can override aircraft controls while simultaneously broadcasting nuclear authorization codes. The implications sent a chill down Marcus's spine. He could crash a commercial aircraft into a target while making it appear that nuclear weapons were being deployed. Exactly. Even if no actual nuclear devices detonate, the panic and response from world governments could trigger conflicts that we might not be able to control. We're talking about the potential collapse of international nuclear treaties. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, a technical analyst Marcus didn't recognize, spread additional documents across the table. We've analyzed Morrison's background extensively. He's brilliant, methodical, and apparently has been planning this for months. His marriage to Dr. Walsh was arranged specifically for this operation. So, she is a willing participant? That's unclear. Our surveillance suggests she may have been coerced initially, but her technical contributions to the project appear genuine. She's either been converted to his cause or is an exceptional actor under duress. Sarah pointed to a series of photographs taken during the aircraft evacuation. The device has to be somewhere on that plane. Morrison couldn't risk losing it during the flight, so it's either hidden in a location we haven't searched or it's been disguised as something innocent. Marcus studied the technical specifications of Morrison's stolen equipment. His years of working with demolitions experts had given him insight into how engineers thought about concealing dangerous devices. Has anyone checked the aircraft's galley equipment? Commercial kitchens have heating elements, electrical systems, even small computers for inventory management. A skilled engineer could integrate a device into existing systems without it being obvious to standard security sweeps. Colonel Mitchell nodded to one of his subordinates, who immediately began coordinating with the aircraft search teams. There's another complication, Dr. Harper continued. Morrison knows we're onto him by now. The military escort and unscheduled landing would have made our surveillance obvious. If he has any way of remotely activating his device, he might use it as leverage to negotiate. As if summoned by her words, an aide rushed into the briefing room carrying an urgent message. Colonel Mitchell read it quickly, his expression darkening. Morrison is requesting to speak with whoever is in charge of the operation. He claims to have information about additional devices and wants to negotiate terms for Dr. Walsh's release. Sarah looked at Marcus. This is where your experience might be crucial. You've dealt with hostage situations in operational environments. How do we approach someone who's holding both a person and a weapon of mass destruction? Marcus considered the variables. First priority is confirming Dr. Walsh's status and safety. Second is determining whether Morrison is bluffing about additional devices. If he's built one, he may have built others. We need intelligence before we can formulate a response strategy. Agreed. But who conducts the negotiation? Morrison is military, so he might respond better to someone in uniform. Colonel Mitchell shook his head. This has moved beyond military jurisdiction. FBI will take lead on negotiations, but they'll need technical support from someone who understands the weapons systems involved. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text from his sister, but a call. He looked at the display and felt his heart sink. Carmen's number, but calling instead of texting usually meant bad news. I need to take this, he said quietly, stepping away from the group. Marcus. Carmen's voice was strained, barely holding back tears. Dad's asking for you constantly. The doctors say we should call on the priest. Where are you? Marcus closed his eyes and tried to find words that would explain why he couldn't be there without revealing classified information. I'm stuck in an airport. Military situation. I can't leave right now. Military situation? Marcus, Dad is dying. Whatever it is, it can't be more important than this. The truth hit him like a physical blow. His father was dying while Marcus dealt with a crisis that could affect thousands of lives. There was no good choice here, no way to be in two places at once. Carmen, I will be there if I could. You know that. Tell Dad I love him and I'm fighting to get home. He could hear her crying as she hung up. When Marcus returned to the group, Sarah could see the anguish in his face. Bad news from home? My father's condition is deteriorating rapidly. But I understand the priority here. Colonel Mitchell looked uncomfortable with the personal drama, but Dr. Harper seemed to understand. Commander Rodriguez, is there any family member who could video call with your father? Sometimes that helps in situations like this. Marcus nodded gratefully. I'll arrange something if possible. The briefing room door opened again, and this time FBI Special Agent David Park entered with what appeared to be a direct communication device. Morrison wants to talk immediately. He claims he has a deadline, and if we don't respond within 30 minutes, he'll demonstrate his device on another aircraft currently en route to Houston. The room fell silent. The threat had just escalated from recovering stolen technology to preventing an active attack on innocent civilians. Marcus stepped forward. Let me talk to him. Military to military. Sometimes operators respond better to someone who understands their background and training. Sarah looked skeptical. Morrison isn't an operator. He's an engineer who stole classified technology. But he's military trained and he's operating under pressure. I've talked down situation before where technical personnel were making decisions based on incomplete information. Colonel Mitchell considered the proposal. What's your assessment of the risk if Morrison realizes we have someone with your background involved? If he's as smart as his file suggests, he already knows there's a seal on the passenger manifest. Our presence here isn't exactly subtle. The question is whether he sees me as a threat or an opportunity for legitimate negotiation. Agent Park held up the communication device. We're running out of time. Morrison wants an answer in 23 minutes. Marcus looked around the room at the assembled experts and decision-makers. What's the current status of a Houston flight he's threatening? United 1247, Boeing 737, currently over Central Texas with 138 souls on board. The number hit Marcus like a hammer. 138 people who had no idea they might become unwilling weapons in a demonstration of stolen military technology. Patch me through to Morrison, Marcus said. But monitor everything and be ready to cut the connection if he starts giving instructions to activate any devices. As Agent Park activated the communication link, Marcus thought about his father asking for him, and the aircraft full of innocent people whose lives now depended on his ability to understand and manipulate a desperate engineer. Lieutenant Morrison, Marcus said in the microphone, this is Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, U.S. Navy SEALs. I understand you want to discuss the situation. Morrison's voice came through clearly, betraying only slight stress despite his circumstances. Commander Rodriguez, I wasn't expecting military involvement. Are you authorized to negotiate on behalf of the federal government? I'm authorized to listen and relay information to decision-makers. What are your terms? First, I want confirmation that Dr. Walsh is being treated well and will be released regardless of what happens to me. Second, I want transportation to a neutral country and 24 hours head start before any international alerts are issued. Marcus exchanged glances with the task force members around him. In exchange for what? The location of my device on the aircraft, the technical specifications for disabling it, and confirmation that there are no additional devices deployed elsewhere. What about the Houston flight you mentioned? There was a long pause before Morrison responded. That depends on how quickly we can reach an agreement. My modification to the stolen technology includes a dead man switch. If I don't input a specific code every 60 minutes, it automatically activates on the nearest aircraft within range. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Morrison hadn't just built a remote weapon. He'd created an automated system that would continue operating even if he was killed or captured. Morrison, you're talking about killing innocent people to demonstrate a point. That's not the action of a professional military officer. Commander, I've seen what our government does with advanced weapons technology. I've seen how quickly defensive systems become offensive weapons used against civilians. This device proves that our entire air transportation system is vulnerable. Someone needs to force the world to acknowledge that vulnerability before it's exploited by actual terrorists. Marcus realized he was dealing with someone who believed he was acting from principle rather than greed or malice. That made Morrison simultaneously more predictable and more dangerous because true believers were willing to accept casualties for their cause. "What's your timeline for a decision?" Marcus asked. 15 minutes, Commander. After that, Houston Flight 1247 becomes an unwilling demonstration of what this technology can do. The communication link went silent, leaving the briefing room in tense quiet. Colonel Mitchell spoke first. "Assessment, Commander?" Marcus looked at his watch and thought about his father dying alone while asking for his son. He thought about 138 innocent people on an aircraft over Texas who had no idea their lives hung in the balance of a negotiation in a military hangar in Louisiana. He believes he's doing the right thing, which makes him extremely dangerous. But he's also given us valuable intelligence about the dead man's switch. If we can locate and disable his device before the deadline, we can save the Houston flight and prevent any future activations. "That's a big if," Sarah said. "We have 14 minutes and still haven't found the device." Marcus was already moving toward the door. "Then we need to get back on that aircraft and search it like our lives depend on it." "Because they do." Marcus raced across the tarmac toward the Boeing 777, his mind processing everything Morrison had revealed about the dead man's switch. 12 minutes until the Houston flight became a weapon. 12 minutes to find a device that a brilliant engineer had successfully hidden from multiple security sweeps. Sarah caught up with him as he reached the aircraft stairs. "Marcus, what aren't you telling me? I can see you've got an idea." Morrison said the device activates on the nearest aircraft within range. That suggests it's using some kind of proximity detection system, probably radar or transponder identification. So it needs an external antenna to function properly. You can't detect and target other aircraft from inside a sealed aluminum fuselage without some way of connecting to the outside environment. Marcus bounded up the stairs into the aircraft, followed by Sarah and a team of bomb disposal specialists. The passenger cabin had been stripped of personal belongings and subjected to intensive examination, but Marcus was looking for something the previous searches might have missed. "Show me exactly where Morrison was sitting," he said. Sarah led him to row 12, where residual evidence of the technical examination was still visible. Seat cushions had been removed and examined. Floor panels had been lifted. Even the overhead bins had been dismantled and reassembled. Marcus knelt in the aisle and examined the aircraft structure with the focused intensity that had kept him alive through dozens of dangerous missions. His training in explosive devices had taught him to think like the people who built them, to understand their logic and limitations. "Morrison's an engineer, not a field operative," Marcus said, running his hands along the wall panels. "He wouldn't have had time to make major structural modifications to the aircraft. Whatever he did had to be quick, simple, and reversible. We've already checked all the obvious hiding places," one of the bomb specialists said. "Air vents, electrical panels, even the toilet systems." Marcus stood and looked around the cabin with new eyes. What if he didn't hide the device inside the aircraft structure? What if he hid it in plain sight? He moved to the overhead bin above Morrison's seat and began examining the standard safety equipment stored there. Life vests, oxygen bottles, emergency flashlights, all standard equipment that would be present on every commercial flight. Then Marcus saw it. One of the portable oxygen bottles was slightly different from the others. The same size and shape, but the manufacturer's label was wrong. Where the other bottles showed standard aviation supplier markings, this one carried electronics company logos. "Found it," Marcus called out. He replaced a standard oxygen bottle with his device, disguised it as safety equipment that no one would think to examine closely. Sarah immediately called for additional bomb disposal equipment, while Marcus carefully examined the fake oxygen bottle. It was expertly constructed, with what appeared to be a small antenna system built into the top, where the normal oxygen release valve would be. "How much time do we have?" Marcus asked. 8 minutes until Morrison's deadline. Marcus activated his phone and called Colonel Mitchell. "Sir, we've located the device. It's disguised as emergency oxygen equipment. We need immediate technical support to disable it safely." Dr. Harper's voice came through the speaker. Commander, based on Morrison's background, the device probably has anti-tampering protection. If you try to disable it incorrectly, it might activate immediately. Marcus stared at the device, weighing their options. 8 minutes to save 138 innocent people, but one wrong move could trigger exactly what they were trying to prevent. His phone rang. Carmen calling again. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something made him accept the call. Carmen, I can't talk right now. Marcus, Dad's gone. He passed away 3 minutes ago. His last words were asking where you were. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. While he'd been searching for Morrison's device, his father had died alone, asking for the son who couldn't be there. Marcus closed his eyes and felt the weight of every choice he'd made in his life. Every mission that had kept him away from family. Every moment he'd chosen duty over the people who loved him. Marcus. Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. We need you to focus. 6 minutes. He opened his eyes and looked at the device that could kill 138 people if he made a mistake. His father was gone, but those passengers were still alive, still depending on decisions made by people they would never meet. Carmen, I love you. Take care of the arrangements. I'll be home as soon as I can. Marcus hung up and turned his complete attention to Morrison's device. His father had taught him that a man protects the people who can't protect themselves. Right now, that meant 138 strangers on a flight over Texas. Dr. Harper, walk me through what Morrison would have done to weaponize this device. Based on his technical background, he would have integrated a radio frequency transmitter with aircraft identification capabilities. The device probably scans for nearby aircraft transponder signals, then broadcasts override commands on aviation frequencies. Marcus examined the fake oxygen bottle more carefully. The antenna system was more sophisticated than he'd initially realized, with multiple elements designed to transmit on different frequencies simultaneously. What if we don't try to disable it completely? What if we just block its transmission capability? Sarah looked at him sharply. Ow! Faraday cage principle. If we can surround the device with conductive material, it won't be able to transmit radio signals. The electronics might still function, but they won't be able to reach other aircraft. One of the bomb specialists shook his head. That's theoretical. We don't know how the anti-tampering systems work. Moving the device at all might trigger it. Marcus checked his watch. For minutes until Morrison's deadline. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Commander Rodriguez, this is Morrison. I know you found my device. Don't try to disable it. The Houston flight will be safe if you agree to my terms. Marcus showed the message to Sarah. He's been monitoring our communications somehow. That's impossible. All our channels are encrypted, unless he planted monitoring equipment elsewhere on the aircraft, or unless Dr. Walsh is providing technical support remotely. Another text appeared. 3 minutes, Commander. I'm not bluffing about the dead man's switch. Marcus made a decision that went against everything in his technical training. Instead of trying to disable or contain Morrison's device, he carefully removed it from the overhead bin and carried it toward the aircraft exit. Marcus, what are you doing? Sarah called after him. Morrison said the device targets the nearest aircraft within range. If I can get it far enough away from the airport, it won't be able to detect or target the Houston flight. That's insane. You'll be carrying a live weapon of mass destruction. Marcus paused at the aircraft door and looked back at Sarah. My father just died while I was trying to save people I've never met. I'm not going to let his death be meaningless by allowing Morrison to kill 138 more innocents. He descended the aircraft stairs carrying Morrison's device, ignoring the shouts of protest from the technical team. A military vehicle was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, engine running. Marcus jumped into the driver's seat and gunned the engine, heading away from the airbase at maximum speed. His plan was desperate and probably suicidal, but it was the only option he could see that guaranteed the Houston flight would be safe. As he drove, Marcus's phone rang. Morrison calling directly. Commander, what are you doing? Saving lives, Lieutenant. Same as you claim to be doing. You don't understand. The device has a range of 20 miles. You can't drive far enough away to protect that aircraft. Marcus looked at the speedometer. He was already doing 70 miles per hour on a road that wasn't designed for high-speed driving. Then, I'll keep driving until I'm outside that range. Commander, the device will detonate if it's moved more than 5 miles from its calibrated position. You're carrying a bomb, not just a radio transmitter. The revelation should have terrified Marcus, but instead he felt a strange sense of clarity. His father was gone. The people on a Houston flight deserved to live. Sometimes the choice was that simple. Morrison, if you have any honor left as a military officer, tell me how to disable this thing safely. There was a long pause before Morrison responded. Cut the red wire connecting the antenna assembly to the main circuit board. But, Commander, if you're wrong about the wire, the device will activate immediately. Marcus pulled off the road and carefully examined Morrison's device. There were dozens of wires, and several of them appeared red under the interior lighting of the vehicle. His phone showed 1 minute until Morrison's deadline. Marcus thought about his father teaching him to work with his hands, to trust his instincts when technical knowledge wasn't enough. He thought about all the times his SEAL training had prepared him to make life-or-death decisions with incomplete information. He found the wire that connected most directly between the antenna system and what appeared to be the main circuit board. It was red, but so were 2 others. Marcus cut the wire and waited for either silence or explosion. Nothing happened. His phone rang immediately. Morrison again. Commander, you disabled the device. How'd you know which wire to cut? Marcus looked at the now silent device in his lap. Lucky guess, Lieutenant. Now let's talk about Dr. Walsh and your surrender. I'll release Dr. Walsh at the main terminal. And, Commander, your father would be proud of what you did today. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to believe that was true. 2 hours later, after Morrison's surrender and Dr. Walsh's safe release, Marcus sat in the Air Base commander's office making arrangements to fly home for his father's funeral. Sarah had stayed with him through the debriefing, and now she was helping him process travel arrangements. Marcus, what you did was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both, he replied. But those people on a Houston flight are alive, and that's what matters. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Your father raised a good man. Marcus nodded and tried to find comfort in that truth as he prepared to go home and bury the man who had taught him the difference between duty and honor. Sometimes they were the same thing. Sometimes they weren't. Today, Marcus had chosen honor, and 138 innocent people would go home to their families because of that choice. It would have to be enough.